will start in 1 minute. So as we are waiting, if you all want to say hello and where you're coming in from today. I'm in Erie, Pennsylvania, which is where I was born and raised, but I live in Austin, Texas. So I'm bringing some Rust Belt realness to the call today, which is a thing, Ryan.
I'm obsessed with Rust Belt realness. That'll
The
be
Rust
on there
Belt
for next
realness.
for sure.
How cold is it in Minneapolis, Allison?
Oh, yesterday I went to my kids' baseball game and it was like 50 degrees out.
Ooh,
Feels unfair in June. It's like we finally have nice weather in Minnesota and it was just freezing and windy.
Yeah. Oh man, we got people from all over: San Antonio, Montana, San Diego. I bet it's. Is San Diego getting the infamous June gloom right now, or has it steered away to Kim? June gloom. Yep. Oh, it's cold in Massachusetts too. I was working in front of a window and I had the window raised yesterday. I also had to put a blanket on because it was about 58 degrees in Erie yesterday. Meanwhile, it's about 95 in Austin. So a bit refreshing. Okay. Well, let's get started. Again, hello and welcome. I am very excited for today's convo on sales leave policies. I'm Kelly. I'm your host today. I'm the director of content at QuotaPath. And our topic today is one that I've written about extensively. And what's really fun is that it's a topic that I've been inspired directly by one of our guests, Allison, with her work with Parentally. She joins us today, and I've actually quoted her in my own writing from her piece on Medium from 4 years ago. What's more, I've also partnered with Jesse and Ryan, who joined us today, for their experience in work creating policies at their own organizations, as well as in partnership with others. So first, I want to give a huge shout out to Women in Sales. For those with us today unfamiliar, Women in Sales is an inclusive global professional community that elevates and connects women across sales. As an active member in the Slack, I can confidently say it is a safe, educational, and super inspiring community to be a part of. And if you're interested in joining, don't wait anymore. Just do it. It's the best. And I will say hi to you as soon as you pop your intro in there. Okay, coming back to today's topic, I am from QuotaPath. I said that, which has been a proud partner of Women in Sales for, I think we're going on 3 years, maybe 4. Why is QuotaPath connected to this topic? We are a sales compensation platform, and our principles are built on building fair and logical comp plans that drive growth for the org and earn reps more money. I want to pause. I said fair and logical comp plans, and this includes fair plans that give reps a true shot at on-target earnings. So what do you think happens when reps go out on parental leave? Are they earning any incentive pay while they're out with their new baby, like a percentage or an average? Is anyone keeping their pipeline warm so it's not empty upon their return? Are they coming back to a full quota while staring up at their team's leaderboard from the very bottom? Unfortunately, we found the answers are oftentimes no. And that is why we are talking today with Ryan, Jesse, and Allison, so that eventually every org will say yes to every single one of those questions. So thank you everyone for joining me on that short narrative. Are we ready? Let's kick things off. I would love for each of our panelists to please let us know who you are, what company you represent, and take a moment to walk us through your own leave experiences. What was fair and what would you have improved on? Jesse, since you are in my top left corner, I'd love to kick it over to you first.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, Kelly. So I'll start with where I work. So I work for Tilt. We are a leave of absence management platform. I not only work for a leave of absence company, but I also run the sales team. So my title is Vice President of Sales. I've been at the company for going on 6 years. So yeah, I've been doing it for a while. To answer your question, I'll try and keep this succinct. My first leave of absence experience was when I had my first child. That's my daughter. She's 6 now. And actually, my bad experience was what led me to find Tilt. So it actually kind of a blessing in disguise in a way. But I will say the biggest disappointment for me and where I think my leave went wrong is the policy at my company was that you had short-term disability, which is very common for the first 6 weeks or 8 weeks, depending on the type of birth you have, and it was 60% of your pay. Well, I didn't realize until I was on leave that it was 60% of my base pay. So for me, it was 60% of 50% of what I usually take home. And then on top of that, I ended up having an emergency C-section, which is like a whole other story and very traumatic. But so then instead of getting more pay, it was just another 2 weeks added of 60% of 50% of my pay. So it was 8 weeks total. And then I kicked into 4 weeks of full pay from the company, but still just my base. So then for the 4
Wow.
weeks, I'm just getting 50% of what my usual take home is.
Mhm.
So like the lesson for me, and we'll talk about this more later, but I didn't know to ask the questions about whether the policy was based on my full OTE or my base until I was in it. And then I'm like,
It's too late.
yeah.
Yep.
Oh, it was so horrible. And I think a lot of companies just don't realize, they don't think about how the company policy applies to people who have variable comp. So that was my story. It was horrible.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and now you have turned it into a rose, though, and are helping
Yes.
companies do it the right way.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
sorry for your experience, but kudos to you for helping others not have to experience that.
Yes.
All right, Allison, would love to hear about you.
Yeah, I'm very excited to be talking about this topic. As you know, it's something that I feel very strongly about. I'm the founder and CEO of Parentally. We also support companies with the parental leave experience, but not from the logistical filing pay perspective, which is more where Tilt comes into play. We are focused on business continuity and career continuity, namely, how do you build a strong coverage plan? How do you re-onboard employees effectively after work? And so we have a career coaching program for the employee going on leave, and then manager training for the managers. So that's what we do. We sell entirely through businesses. So I'll caveat this by saying I'm not an expert on sales comp plans, but my specific parental leave experience, I had my first child when I was an enterprise sales manager, and I had a small team. So I was selling and managing. I had one person who was pregnant about 7 months when she joined my team. I was also pregnant at the same time. And so I navigated, as I became a mother, both managing someone going through this experience as a direct seller, as well as a manager myself. And it was just, I think Jesse's exactly right. I had no idea what to even ask about. And that is my biggest regret about that piece of my leave experience is I didn't even know what good looks like. I didn't know that there was room to have a better policy. And I then realized after the fact, when I returned from work and saw that, of course, my team had underperformed. We were down a person plus the manager. How it's not just about what happens while you're on leave. It's also like literally years after
that are impacted. That are impacted by this experience.
Yeah, thank you, Allison. So it looks like your video kind of just
I'm going to fix it. One
okay.
second.
Yeah, we'll switch to Ryan. Ryan and I work very closely together. He is our VP of RevOps at QuotaPath. I will kick it over to him. He has tons of experience in creating comp plans and has actually designed the parental leave policies for our sales team here. So Ryan, please take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm Ryan Milligan. I lead go-to-market teams at QuotaPath, so sales, marketing, and revenue operations. From a parental leave experience, my first parental leave was while I was in a RevOps function, so happy to talk about that and how that works supporting a sales team through a parental leave. And then I'm about to go on my second parental leave. Our second daughter is due in mid-July. So this is my first parental leave in a sales leadership capacity, so happy to talk through how we set up the process and the function and making sure the team has a lot of continued success while I'm on leave. I do a lot of compensation plan consulting free to the market. So if you ever have questions about compensation plan design and plans for continuity from a comp perspective through teams leaves, I actually just had conversation with a CRO last week preparing for one of his team members to be on leave. Happy to have some of those conversations live before July 10th, because that's when I'll be out. So
yeah, you're going to have to get him in.
Really looking forward to this conversation, and thank you all for having me.
Yeah, and Ryan, we'll go to you first since you are so close to this. sales leader, first time going on leave. How are you preparing for this? Your team and yourself?
Yeah, I'll start with the team. I think for me as a leader, a lot of my prep is putting together all of the roles and responsibilities from a tactical perspective. I have a master kind of Google sheet myself of all the things that I do. I record looms of myself doing all of them, and then I give kind of assigned owners to those things. So running team meetings, running stand-ups, pipe reviews, all that sort of stuff. And I've kind of delegated that effectively to my team. I find Loom to be a really great recording mechanism for a lot of this stuff, as it's a tangible artifact that people can refer to. Yes, Jesse, it's definitely like another full-time job, as we're also like nesting at nights and the whole combo of things. But yes, I think that having a very clear with the team, here are the roles and responsibilities that I have. Here are the people that as reps you can turn to if you have questions. I have a great sales director in Samantha Manley, who the team is going to lean on pretty heavily while I'm on leave. And our CEO will step in as well as our RevOps team. For me personally, I think a lot of the conversation was around what the org should expect, and having a lot of candid conversations with my CEO about the structure of my leave plan. So, hey, this is the comp structure I have in place today. Here's a proposal for what I think would make sense. Here are some of the edge cases that I could perceive happening. What are the routes for that to be successful? And just making sure that we're, like any comp plan, testing the upper limits or the bounds of potential outcomes that could happen while on leave, to make sure we know both mutually what's going to happen, so that we don't run into situations that many team members, Jesse and Allison talked about previously, around, hey, I thought I was earning 50% of my, or 60% of my full OTE, not 60% of my base, and those sorts of things. So walking through those mechanics is really, really important.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Ryan. And that's obviously from the leadership perspective, to kind of pivot and think of the reps out there, especially the women reps who are maybe thinking of starting to try for a family, or maybe unexpectedly are going to have a baby. What do you do to get something in place if your org just either has no policy or has one that just isn't great? What advice do you have? Jesse, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. One, I would use resources like the ones you've put together to take that to leadership to try and drive some change. And hopefully you can create a policy that is more fair for your team. However, I will say sometimes you have to do what's within your control. And I would say one of the biggest things that you can do for your team, especially for the person who's taking leave, is make sure that they can be successful when they come back. It's really hard when you come back because you're usually building up your pipeline again. You're probably learning new features and things that were released while you were gone. I come from tech. Maybe you aren't selling tech, but whatever it is, there's something new that you have to relearn, or start pitching differently, or whatever the case might be. And so I think it's really important for two things. One, make sure I do commission split for whatever AE is taking over deals for the person who's taking leave. And the split percentage is based on the stage of the deal when it's handed off. And I have a whole tracker. I'm happy to share it with you all if anybody wants to use it, but we put the deal in, the stage, and then who the new AE is. So when it closes, we do the commission split. That way the person who's taking leave is still getting paid on the work that they did. Depending on the deal stage, when they come back, the new AE might pass it back. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is there needs to be a ramp when they get back. Similar to like when you are very first starting the job. And usually for us, that's a quarter. And so we get them back in the round robin. They're building pipeline. They're learning all the new things. It's almost like a re-onboarding.
Yeah, thank you. And I even want to go a step even further, or I guess ahead, in that, and I will say this from firsthand experience. When I was not in sales, but at a previous org, when I was pregnant with my first child, I was poking around trying to learn more about the leave policy. And that ended up becoming a pregnancy announcement that I did not know I was making. So that was really cool for that to happen. It was not. So I'm just curious, Allison, like how can individual contributors kind of learn more about the policy, maybe without trying to have a non-announcement announcement?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I have a good answer to that question. I think what I will say is there's a big shift, even in the past 4 years since I wrote that blog post. Like people are asking about these comp plans in in interview processes. I think that there's a better awareness now that companies need to have a policy. And I don't think that that existed as much like 5, 6, 7 years ago. I would say if you're trying to advocate for our company needs an explicit policy and it needs to be written down, try and use other information. What are other companies doing? Because that's the best way to sort of like, I don't want to say disassociate from it, but it's not you saying, oh, I'm going to be pregnant soon, or I'm thinking about this, which of course you all are, or we would hope we all care about this. But you can say, hey, like, this is something that we need to have as an organization. And I think especially if you're a sales manager, it's even easier to make it not about you. It's like, we have to do this because everyone's going to ask. I need to continue to support my team. And I think the good news is there's enough now examples from other companies that you can bring forward to say, hey, like, which one do we think we want here? Because I think part of this also is like leadership at companies. Sometimes they may want to do the right thing, but they're like, we don't even know. Like, this just seems like too difficult. And yes, in theory, we want to put together a comp plan, but what does that even mean? And so I think using data and showing what other companies are doing is really powerful. And then the last thing I'd throw into the room is how you think about covering so depends on the type of sale. So like our sale is 12 months on average. And so the way that we think about a comp plan is very different than if there's like a 4-week sales cycle. And so it's not like, here's the way that you should have a comp plan. There's like 5 different things that you should be thinking about and building into your specific comp plan.
I absolutely love that. And I'll add to Allison's note on learn what other companies are doing, learn what other companies that are similar in size and growth. That'll be really helpful. You have communities like Women in Sales to drop your questions in there. You have Ryan, who has Comp Plan Consults. If you want to learn about organizations of similar sizes to you, like there are resources out there. You are going to have to do some work to find out, but know that exists. And that's a great point too. Times have changed. You should be able to ask that question without someone announcing your pregnancy for you.
Or ask a friend to ask about it. That's the other thing, is especially if you have a friend who's a parent who maybe is done having kids, like they will care very deeply about this and fight for it, but they also aren't feeling like they're in a position of weakness because they're like, we're done having kids.
Yep.
That's what I found.
That is a pro tip. Thank you. All right, moving forward to speak to more of the frameworks that Jesse started to get into about sales leave policies. So we're going to talk about RAMP later, but for now, let's talk about compensation and pipeline management. Ryan, I'll start with you. What are some best practices when it comes to determining how are you going to cover incentive pay in a leave policy and follow up? We'll start with comp, then we'll get into pipeline management. So let's start there, Ryan. What do you think?
Yeah, I was particularly pleased by how Jesse approached the problem, because it's a lot of what I advise in a lot of these conversations, which is you want to have a completely black and white, clear policy for what is going to happen to different pipeline based on stage, depth, what have you, and based on your time to close, to Allison's point. So if the way that I typically advise it is you have 2 types of pipeline. Usually when you are about to go on leave, it is pipeline you expect to close while you're on leave based on the depth of how far the conversation is. And then it's pipeline that you don't expect to close, but need to have continued nurtured in one way or another. And for an organization, pipeline that you expect to close while you're on leave, typically you want to give the bulk of the credit to the rep who had done the work to prepare the pipeline for being able to close. In good faith, I advise a lot of senior leaders, sales managers, directors, CROs, what have you, to step in and help support the closing of that handful of ops and give your rep full credit for the work that they did to prepare that op to close while they are on leave. And that can be, and then really for more upstage pipeline, it is a split policy, it is a clean handoff policy, it's whatever kind of policy you want, where the rep who is going on leave gets a very clear and determined amount of credit based on the depth that that pipeline had moved while or before they were going on leave. And that's documented, that's very clear. And you do a review with the rep probably 2 weeks before they're planning, like a month before they're planning, probably a month before they plan on going on leave. Here's your 30 open ops, here's the stage, here's the depth, and here's how we're going to treat every single op from a comp perspective while you're on leave, and here's what will happen when you come back. And then for the business, you can also navigate with the rep. We're probably going to pull you out of the round robin queue, 2 weeks before we expect you to go on leave, just from a continuity you won't be able to get enough depth with a new buyer for that period. Separate, so that's on existing pipeline. So you want to have a really clear existing pipeline policy. And then secondarily, you want to have a very clear guaranteed variable component. So typically orgs will pay anywhere from a third to half of variable guaranteed while a seller is on leave. And that will pair with the commission the seller expects to receive on the deals they expect to close from their pipeline to get them as close to full OTE as possible based on the work they did prior to going on leave. So it's a mix of, it's kind of like it's a down ramping plan, right? Kind of like you ramp a new seller, it's a ramping plan in the inverse. So we'll talk more about ramp when the seller comes back in a minute, but it's a very clear, documented, and mutually agreed upon policy that both protects the cash needs of the business while protecting the relationship with the seller and preparing them to be successful when they return.
Yeah, that's great. And just want to triple down on the documentation is absolutely necessary, and it should be visible with the entire company and accessible. Jesse, what else would you add to that? I know Ryan covered quite a bit there, but anything he didn't touch on?
Yeah, I will mention one thing that I did recently that was new for us. My account manager took a leave of absence. She had her first. She actually just returned on Monday. So she was out for a full quarter. And I told my CEO, I was like, I think gone are the days that Jesse is everyone's backfill. We're too big now. I just have too much going on. Things will fall through the cracks, right? So we decided to try opening up a stretch assignment for anyone in the organization who wanted to apply. And so they were essentially her backfill. And we took away most of her duties, except you got to get contracts renewed, right? So we estimated it was maybe half a day to a full day a week. And then we would do commission split. And so we posted the job only internally, and I had 6 people apply, and I interviewed everyone, and I ended up hiring someone from my marketing team.
That is awesome.
Yeah, it was super unexpected.
Yeah.
He absolutely crushed it. And we have all on-time renewals so far this quarter. So I'm really excited about that. And he took care of everything while she was out. And it worked really well. So I don't know, something maybe to try with your organization that worked really well for us.
I love that. That's very out of the box thinking. Is that something you just were like, let's try this? Or did you see another org do it?
No, we just decided to try it because I didn't know who else was going to cover her book of business. And I just frankly couldn't.
That's great. Allison.
We do the same. Yeah, we do the same thing, but we actually hired someone specifically to be a floater. Cool. Because as you can imagine, parentally, we really attract people who are in that stage of life. And so we have a lot of parental leaves. The only other thing I would add to this, which we haven't mentioned yet, is I will consider double crediting. But it has to be a specific named deal. And so I usually do that in cases where I try to think about what is fair. If this is this person worked this account so hard and it's still top of funnel, but they put in all this work. And now this other person needs to get it across the line. It's going to take quite a bit of time. Then oftentimes it is worth it from just a long-term investment perspective to say, I'm going to double credit this. it also gives me a lot more, I don't know, like loyalty and like people don't expect that. And so every once in a while, if you see that something doesn't feel fair, it's okay to carve it out, but it needs to be, again, like written down and clear. And there should be a true north of like, why are you doing that? And so I love everything that we've said, but there are some situations where maybe somebody's been working a deal for 3 years and it's still, like something that may require some additional work, but you also want to give them credit for all the work they've done before.
And I
The
think
only
you can
other
do
thing,
that. I think you can do that positively, Allison, for
right?
sure. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I totally agree with doing that positively. You just can't do that. As you're not saying that you would be like, you can't do that negatively, which is nice. You basically have like the baseline of what the reps should expect, and then that's a great
Exactly.
example where you can go above and beyond for retention for your reps. Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's considered an exception. The only other thing to think about, which I actually see a lot, is oftentimes non-birth parents will game the system. So, sales reps are amazing at optimizing our comp plans. And so oftentimes what you will see is that when you write this comp plan, for example, if somebody knows they're going to have a huge deal hit and they would be better to be in seat when that deal hits than if they were out of seat, they can run the numbers and say, well, I'm only guaranteed this, and I'm going to have to split the credit. We will oftentimes see non-birth parents come back for like literally a week. So they are in seat when this deal closes, they get full credit, and then they go back out on leave, which does create cultural issues. Like because oftentimes the birth parents aren't able to do that. They're on short-term disability and it's a lot more difficult for them, not to mention like they literally can't, break up their short-term disability leave to come back. So it sounds like an edge case, but I see it happen more often than you would expect.
That's interesting. What advice do you have? I mean, can you avoid that?
I mean, the way to avoid it, which again, you'd have to think about, is this in line with your goals and sort of your culture, is we do see a lot of companies say you can't split your leave, or you can split your leave, but it needs to be in chunks of like 4 weeks at a time. So you limit it so that people can't just come back for the 1 week when the deal is going to close. So that's one way to get around it. I don't know if there are other ways. I don't know if Jesse and Ryan, you've seen other things like that. But I do think it becomes a little bit of a judgment call of like, is it worth optimizing for that? And because there are pros of allowing people to come back for short periods of time as well. So you don't want to over-index on something that maybe isn't actually a problem at the organization, but it's something to think about.
Yeah. Ryan, anything to add there?
I mean, I think the split leave, like the clear split leave policy, is probably the best way to approach it. And I think as long as you and the employee should both, you as the leader and the employee should both be on the same page about when the splits are going to happen and how long they're going to happen for and why. A lot of families will use split leave to extend leave policies naturally, so that until they have other paths to childcare, absolutely, which orgs can determine their plan to support. You do have to be, to Allison's point, you do want to make sure that when you're back for long enough to be able to get kind of like back in seat before you then go on a leave again, because there is that ramp up, ramp down time. So I think that's just from a leave policy perspective, you want to be really clear about, hey, you get max one split, or your chunks have to be X period of time, or in each chunk, your like return has to be this long. And I think as long as you're clear with that, with the parent or the member of the family, totally makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's move along to pipeline management. And Jesse started to get into this. Jesse is no longer available for pipeline management of her team. Ryan, we'll start with you again. What are some things to keep in mind as far as pipeline management? When does the handoff happen? Who is going to take it over? Does this matter based on the size of your sales team, sales cycle, things like that? What would you say?
Yeah, I think some of the stuff we talked about earlier applies here. It's a function of your sales cycle, how long, we at QuotaPath are, sub a month demo to close, oftentimes on average. And so that's a very different approach. If you're handing off an op, you're handing it off once. You're not handing it off and then handing it back to the person on leave, 19 times out of 20, basically. The person who's getting handed it off is carrying it through to the end. So it really depends on a function of But that could be very different for Allison's team, where you could go on leave for 3 months and still be very prepared to take on a deal back once you return from leave, right? So it's a deal closed conversation, and then I think it's also it's just like a mechanics conversation internally. You have your list of pipeline, you review it with the team member who is going on leave. You mutually agree on what you're going to do with that pipeline at said point in time, so that there's no ambiguity. This is what's going to happen, and then you train the rest of the team internally. Hey, you're receiving these 3 opportunities from Sarah, and this is what the handoff will be, and you have to make sure that it's a very clean handoff process for the person receiving the opportunity, and that also the seller is preparing the buyer for what's going to happen next. Hey, I'm heading on leave. Joe will be taking over the opportunity. Here's all the resources that they'll need to be successful for the business as well.
Yeah, great. I think we hit the pre-leave stuff pretty hard. Now let's talk about the return. You're a sales rep, you're coming back from leave. How, from a leadership perspective, how can you set this new parent up for success when they come back, knowing that oftentimes they're returning to maybe an empty pipeline, their whole team has passed them. So how can they avoid that? Jesse, you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start. So again, I don't know if you have control over, what your policy is, but our policy at Tilt, we have a 4-week ramp up period. This is across the board, not just for sales, but it's full-time pay for part-time schedule. And one of the things that I've recommended to my team, just based on personal experience, is to chunk that. So, work like Monday, Tuesday, half day, Wednesday, and then be off the rest of the week. Because if you do every other day, people never know when you're at work, and you're going to work 5 days a week. It just is what it is. So that is the time that I use to kind of do that re-onboarding with the person who's returning. So let me talk to you about the features that we launched. Let me talk to you about our new processes, meet the new people who may have been hired while you were out, whatever the case might be. And then once they're kind of feeling ready, and although most of those people are ready on like day one, then we'll get them back into getting leads, or if you're outbound, get them back on the phones, whatever the case might be. Then I give them a quarter. I think that's honestly for our sales cycle and our team that works for us. And I will say that one of the hardest things, most of my team are female, and one of the hardest things is just like emotionally supporting the employee when they're back, because it's not like the return isn't hard because they're returning. The return is hard because they're scared that they're not going to be able to get their pipeline back where it needs to be, close deals, make money again. And I will say 100% of the time they do it. I have not had a single person not, but it's so scary, especially when you're really good at your job and you just took a break and you've never done it before. And now you're back, you're like, oh shit, I got to do this all over again, So I spend a lot of my one-on-ones being, just like reassuring, supporting, talking through it, really advocating for that person. So anyway, those are some of my tips that have worked on the return to work.
That's really helpful. And it's also like, on top of being scared in the role, you have a new baby at home, which creates a whole nother unpredictable environment. So, and I saw an anonymous question in the Q&A, I'm considering becoming a mom, but I'm worried that it will completely derail my sales career. Can you provide advice? Like that's part of it, is work with your organization to make sure you have this return plan that eases it. And Jesse, it sounds like you have a really great program in place. Ryan, how about you, as far as on the return, making that transition back smooth to eliminate some of these pressures that often come with sales and with being a new parent?
Yeah, I think I agree with Jesse. You treat a person returning from leave in the same way you would be ramping a new hire. So whatever your new hire policy is in terms of quota credit and quota relief should reflect into returning from leave. Whatever the training and enablement there should be the same. And I think that, it's really interesting. In the market that we're in today, teams are being asked to have smaller sales teams be more high performing, right? So, the team that used to be 40 reps might be 10, trying to drive as much attainment as possible. And I think for leaders who aren't thinking about this problem, I tend to pose the question, what if your top performing seller left tomorrow? Like, what would that, it's so much more painful for a 10-person team than a 40-person team. And that moment of returning from leave is a massive point of reflection for a person as to whether they think this company is the right fit for them in the long term. I think a lot of people forget that, but one, I mean, there's just a lot of emotion in that process that Jesse called out. You're potentially leaving, your child who you've been with for a while in a different body of care. You are staring at that leaderboard that you're kind of at the bottom of. You might have major confidence issues. That's a point at which you could say, hey, I'm 2 weeks in, this isn't right for me. I'm going to go find another job or do something else. And so you have to be really transparent with the seller that you have confidence that they can be back and be very successful, and that you have a very clear process to get them back up and running again. And I think for the people who don't spend a lot of time on this, if you want to be super pragmatic about it, it's a math equation, right? If you just stripped out, half of your top performing sellers who all decided to go, went on leave in the next like 3 or 4 years, what would that mean for and if you lost all of them because of a terrible leave policy, what would that mean for revenue, for performance, for board reporting? And so I think that's what a lot of leaders have to start thinking about is there's the emotional piece, absolutely, which is incredibly important, but also the mathematical piece of having a high functioning business again.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Allison.
No, I was just going to say this is really the sales manager's responsibility. And I would even take this perspective of like how we run our business is the return to work experience is the most important thing for any manager, regardless of if you're in sales or not. And so it's really important for the manager to take this experience seriously. And I would say like, I personally think the worst experience when you return to work in sales is feeling like you've got this stale pipeline and like nothing. It's like I have to start over. And so the way I've always thought about this at my last company and at Parentally is how do we pull up about a month before this person is going to come back to work and get things going, which sometimes sounds counterintuitive because you're like, oh no, you don't want to stress them out. They're going to come back. They need to ease into it. Well, they are going to be so stressed if they have nothing. And so there are actually really great ways to say, whether we're going to tee up different opportunities as the sales manager. Of course, this totally depends on the context and your sales cycle and whatnot. But like we had someone who just returned from leave and we had this process where we had our head of marketing who set a bunch of meetings and held a bunch of early stage meetings so that when she came back, we're like, here's some new stuff that we've barely gotten off the ground. And it wasn't a seller. It was another person within the organization. So there isn't this competition, but that's not necessarily the right solution for everyone, but I think every manager should be thinking, how do they return to work and get excited and feel like there's momentum and there's something for them here? Because otherwise they return and they're just like, is this the same job that I had before, but way worse because I have nothing going on right now? And even if I'm given a ramp, like ramp for what? Like it just doesn't feel good versus you get them really excited. Hey, I saved. And I loved Ryan's recommendation of like, if the manager steps in to do a few things for this person, it doesn't need to be like, here's an entire beautiful pipeline for you to come back to. But like, here are a few really exciting deals that I got started that I'm now going to give to you just as like a confidence builder, an excitement thing. I think that goes a really long way in getting people to like get their groove back a little bit.
Well, and if you have a faster sales cycle, like we tend to, and you have like a mid-market or enterprise rep who's coming back, maybe give them a couple quick SMB wins to get their confidence back, like a couple, maybe these were like beneath them in the role, but hey, I'm going to throw you a couple really easy confidence builders. Because if you've been on leave for 3 or 6 months, you haven't closed a deal in 3 or 6 months. And that might've been the longest time you've gone without closing a deal in your entire career. So it's just kind of those like fundamental layup mechanics, just to make sure you're feeling like you kind of have your groove back.
I love that there is kind of a shift in mindset happening on this call, and it's less of let's not have the sales rep be scared. Let's have the sales leader be scared that they're going to lose that sales rep for having a poor policy in place. Like let's think from that mindset versus someone being scared to come back or scared to have a child while being a sales professional.
I mean, as a
Thanks.
sales leader, you should be constantly like aware of why your top performers would leave your company at all times. Like that should kind of
Mhm.
always keep you up at night a little bit. Not like, I mean, you're doing the work to support them, but it's the thing that I always think about. If three top performers all decided to leave tomorrow, what would I do? You know,
Panic.
you want to fight that at all.
Your marketer will be a sales rep. Awesome. All right. So we've talked about the compensation side, the pipeline side, ramping, quota alleviation. What other ongoing support should you be aware of with new parents that managers, leaders should be aware of? I, for one, was not planning for pumping schedules when I had my number one and realized I had to put calendar blocks on my schedules to be the dairy factory that I was. What are some other things to keep in mind? Allison, I'll start with you, please.
So here's my shout out for women being a woman in sales. I actually think that this is one of the best jobs for mothers. Of course, I think it's good jobs for anyone, but specifically for mothers, because I truly feel that flexibility is so critical for me as a mother, as a really ambitious, high performing person. And sales gives you flexibility. And so I think that I just want to like throw that out there that there are a lot of different benefits and things that companies can offer you, but I think oftentimes sales gets a bad rap for women specifically of like, because it is very disruptive when you go on parental leave. But if you can get through that and if you can handle this really well, like the best thing for you is you return to work. And it's one of the only jobs where nobody cares how you get there. They just care that you get there. And so I personally think if I were giving advice to, a first-time mom who's about to come back to work, and she asks, like, what are the things that I should be thinking about? My number one piece of advice would be think about the way that you work, because you could probably work more efficiently and do even better. And that might even improve your results. And I think oftentimes, and I did this as well myself, is like you return to work as a new mom and you're like trying to do the same things that you did before you were a mom, where you didn't have the same constraints and you didn't have the same emotional distraction to some extent. And thinking, and like you literally have to proactively work on teaching yourself a new way to work, but it will get better if you are focused on that. And so I think anything that can help you focus on new habits, more efficiency, what is going to give you to that end result better, faster, so that you also have that flexibility when things aren't going as planned at home, which is going to happen. And then I think also think about, this is a little bit more tactical, travel for work is something that I think people oftentimes don't think about and can be a little bit difficult to navigate those conversations. So I know I'm not really answering you, Kelly, of like what benefits, but these are sort of like the things I would be thinking about. My recommendation is always don't talk to your manager about this until you're back at work, because oftentimes people think, I won't want to travel because I'm breastfeeding, when I return to work. Well, you might miss out on a lot of great professional opportunities. You may also love to travel. I traveled extensively while I was breastfeeding, and it's super annoying from like the pumping perspective, but it was so fun to have a break and be by myself for like 2 nights. So you don't want to have that conversation until you know how you really feel, and you won't really know until you return to work. And so I think that there are just like interesting ways to approach the return to work experience as a new mom. Talk to other mothers in sales who are sort of like past that stage, hear what they say. A lot of it, I can't remember if this was Jesse or Ryan calling out the confidence piece. That's real. Like that's a problem. And oftentimes it's just in your head. And so just talking to people who've been there, done that can be super helpful.
Oh, so everything you just said is so true. And I just want to add too, like, it's okay if you want to work. Like, it's okay as a new mom that you want to be out there and you want to work, and you shouldn't be like, wait, shouldn't I be like obsessed with my baby? Like, guess what? You can be obsessed with your baby and your job and still want to do a killer job at what you do professionally. So like, I remember kind of dealing with that postpartum on like, am I like working too much? It wasn't that I was working too much. It was, do I want to work too much right now? Like, hell yeah, I love working. And I love my kids. Both can coexist. Sweet. Anything else, Jesse or Ryan, on just like making that return easier for the parents outside of comp and all that fun stuff?
So one of the things I talk about with my team when they return is like kind of two things with Allison was mentioning, like your schedule's different, right? So one thing is this is not a hard and fast rule, but I highly recommend that you just like don't plan any vacations for a little while or any, time off, because your time off is going to be different. Like the reasons why you need time off are changing, right? It's probably going to be because daycare is closed or because your kid's sick or, you have a checkup, a new appointment, or, whatever it is. And so I have noticed that sometimes reps will get very anxious if, oh my gosh, I have this vacation plan, but now I've taken off all this time that I didn't expect because I'm a new parent and I didn't know that I was going to need all this random time off. So kind of feel it out and know that maybe some of your what used to be, PTO time or whatever you call it might now be daycare close time. And that's just different. And then the other thing too is, as a manager, I love that we were talking about the accountability and responsibility of the manager, because I believe that's 100% the case. I tell my team, you are going to have days where you're going to call me and you're going to say, I got to go pick up my kid from school, or they were up in the night and they have a fever and I don't know what to do. I don't have any care. I can't work today. And that's okay. I know this is going to happen. I'm here for you. We'll figure out coverage. I can jump on a call for you if I need to, or somebody else can. We got it. But I don't want them to suffer with that in silence and not be able to be open with me that that's what they're going through. So I have those conversations early and often in the beginning until they get comfortable with, just being super transparent with what's going on, how I can help.
That's great. And that also kind of goes back to what Allison said on like sales is a great path for parents, for moms. Like, let's rebrand that. Sales is great for moms. What are we missing? I know we've got about 13 minutes left and we will open this up to a Q&A, but just any final thoughts as far as like, if you are wanting to go have this conversation tomorrow with leadership, or yeah, we'll start there. What do you do first? We had to, just to recap, we had, find out some data, do some research that you can actually bring some points to the conversation. Maybe have a friend ask on your behalf. I love that suggestion. Reach out to Women in Sales, reach out to us. What else? What else can people do in this position that they're kind of like, God, I just am still a little worried to bring this up?
Kelly, Kim threw a question in chat about the first person you're on mat leave later this year. So I don't know if you want to just take it.
We'll just go to there then. Yeah. Kim, thanks for the question. So we're an early stage 10-person company with our first person going out on leave later this year. So they're in a good position to build this right away from the start. Any thoughts on the biggest things to consider, specifically around the actual leave policy and how long it should be? Anyone have some thoughts there?
Yeah, I can jump into that a little bit. First of all, we do have benchmarking data. So if anybody wants that from us, I'm happy to send it over. I mean, shoot me a LinkedIn message or email, or Kelly, I can provide stuff to you. But that actually really helps, like starting there. So what do other companies of this size typically provide? And then, but I will say, like, just best practices across industries right now is typically 12 weeks. And typically what we see anyway, and Allison, I'm curious if you do too, but the birthing and the non-birthing are typically matching. So giving non-birthing parents as much time as well, which I think is like a newer trend. And then, just make sure that you're really considering how the policy applies to OTE compared to base. If you have any kind of guaranteed kind of like commission or variable comp, like what Ryan was mentioning, that would be really great. But with 10 people, I completely understand that you might not be able to afford something like that. But those are kind of the basics right now that I would start with.
Thank you. Great question. Anything else, guys? Fire them away. We'll just go to the chat now.
I think the hard part about that question too is like, actually, who's going to do the work at a 10-person company? And I'm saying this from my perspective, where we are a 10-person like core team, and then we have a whole coaching team that makes us larger, but like we really are 10 people that are working on most of the sort of day-to-day work. I would be more focused on what do we do, especially if they're the only salesperson. Maybe you have a few more. But yeah, I think in terms of like and the other thing to think about is, I don't know, I'm assuming that if the company is small, it maybe doesn't have a long track record of ability to even achieve certain goals. What does OTE even mean at a small company? It does introduce a little bit more complexity of like these really large tech companies, which are our clients. They're very clear. Like, we're guaranteeing 80% or 100% of OTE, but oftentimes with small companies, you can't even say what OTE is. So it's like, how do I handle this? So I do think I would have to ask you like 20 more questions to give actual good advice, but it definitely makes it a little bit more challenging. And I would say don't put so much pressure on yourself that you need to like define it forever. You are small and you need to be considering like what's best for the business and what is best for this person and what's realistic, I should say.
Two more questions have popped up. Thank you for answering that. We'll go with this one first. What are ways we can empower managers?
I mean, I think for me, your thoughts on parental leave have to be top down at like a CRO management team level in order to be successful. Like, if you have a management team that's rarely going on leave, you're not like setting the example like down throughout the org that it's like supported. I think in terms of how a VP of sales, for example, could support her manager who has a team member going on leave, for example, I think might be the meat of the question. But Tristan, tell me if you feel otherwise. Is that the policy comes from that senior go-to-market leader, and they see supporting their employees through parental leave as a smart business decision. And I think that those phrases are not really said a lot. A lot of people talk about parental leave as like supporting the employee, which I think is it's a good thing to say. Obviously, I want to support people I work with because I care about them to be successful. But it is also a smart quantitative business decision for me to have good leave policy for strong rep retention and long-term success of the business and like predictability of revenue. And I think that is where a lot of the conversation should come from first, from a VP of sales CRO, to say we have these policies in place because I know that if I don't have a policy like this in place, I run the risk of losing a top performer tomorrow, which at an incredibly lean growth stage startup is hyper damaging to my like revenue predictability. And so I think that's how you empower a manager, is through that messaging, and that messaging trickling all the way down to the person going on leave. If they're like an individual contributing rep, like, I am supporting you, one, because I care about you as a person and want you to have a great and fruitful pregnancy relationship with your child, but also I think you are key to the success of this business quantitatively. And so I'm investing in your leave and your return from leave because it makes financial sense for this business.
This is such a selfish answer, but this is like why we run manager training for companies, because managers' biggest questions are like, I want to be supportive, but like, this is going to hurt me and my team. And what do I do about it? So I would add, like, managers also need help with like, what happens? If I'm a person down, like, what am I supposed to do? And I think sometimes we forget that like most managers are good people and they want to support people, but then they're like, but am I being held accountable to a team goal when my headcount is being cut? And so sometimes managers need a thought partner. They need their manager to help them with this. They need more budget to bring in a backfill or spend more money on marketing or, whatever. And so I think for managers too, they're like really scared. How am I supposed to deliver on business results?
Yep. Jess, anything?
The only thing I would add is also any kind of education on leave laws, things like FMLA. We hear a lot. We have a manager dashboard, and it is inclusive of training. Lightweight compared to what Allison does. But I would say like one of the biggest values of that in the Tilt platform is that managers tend to not say anything if they don't know what to say. And the worst way for your manager to show up is to not say anything to you about leave, or the worst case scenario is them actually saying something that they shouldn't say.
Mhm.
So I think just some education on what they can and can't say, and some of those leave laws, what job protection means. Can they be communicating with an employee while they're on leave? Things like that will really help a manager be like, okay, I know what the guardrails are. I know what I can and can't do. So now I can have these conversations with my employee. I know I'm saying the right thing, or at least doing my best and not saying anything that's like, I shouldn't.
Yeah, that's a great tip. There's one more question in here. A lot of people at my company see women going on leave as taking a paid vacation. Woof. How can I combat this? Any thoughts
I
there?
honestly don't know.
Yeah,
Like,
have them babysit, realize.
so I've never heard that myself, like firsthand. And whenever I hear that, I'm like, does that person have kids? Like, I would pay money to not have to. This is a bad thing to say, but like, I just find the postpartum stage to be so difficult that I would avoid it at all costs if it meant I could still have a child. Um, I think that my curiosity, if somebody said that, would be, is this coming from a place of they're being punished because somebody is stepping away? Because that's the only thing I can understand. And by punished, I mean they're feeling that they get overwhelmed, they get overworked, they get asked to take on this work. And so this is them sort of lashing out to that, because otherwise I think anyone who's had children knows it's not a vacation at all. And there is some validity into feeling like, okay, but I don't want to have to suffer because this other person is choosing to expand their family. And I think that's a valid reaction. It's not valid to say that and to make that statement, but I think I'm assuming the emotions behind it are more from a place of like, but this is really bad for me. That's the only way that I can like justify this in my head.
Yeah, that was helpful for me to process because I saw red as soon as I read that. So thank you, Allison. And Ryan, anything to add there?
Well, one thing that I do, the other thing you could ask the person saying that, is it because they feel like if they don't plan on ever having children or not in that stage of their lives, like, is it this person has a leave and I don't have a path to any sort of leave in that way, myself. Now there's a lot of reasons why that's very, very different, but there are routes that orgs can take around like sabbaticals and other, like, I'd be interested to uncover, is that a lot of the why they feel that way too? Is that for team members who don't ever plan on having children, do they feel like they are not going to have that opportunity ever in their work to step away for that period of time? So I think it's more of an exploration of to Allison's point, of the motivation of the question. I think would uncover a lot, honestly.
Yeah, and good advice just anytime someone says something that's a little makes you go, what's happening there? Why do we have these thoughts? Well, great. We are at time. I don't see any more questions, so I will wrap it up. Thank you, Jesse. Thank you, Allison. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Women in Sales. And thank you to all of you who attended this session. This was recorded. It will be available to watch for those who weren't able to make it, or those who want to rewatch it. I will also be using this to create a follow-up email and blog to highlight some of the key takeaways from this. So stand by for that. And yeah, thank you to everyone. Round of applause to our panelists, and have a great rest of your week. Happy June. Bye,
Thank
y'all.
you.
Thanks, team.